The Council of Zephyria had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 standard cycles. Their crystalline spires stretched across 7 sectors, each one a testament to their ancient wisdom and unshakable authority. In all their recorded history, no species had ever challenged their dominion. Until now, Ambassador Kethare adjusted her ceremonial robes as she walked through the marble corridors of the High Council chambers. The urgent summons had come at dawn, interrupting her meditation cycle. Something had disturbed the elders, and that hadn't happened in living memory. The great doors opened with a whisper, revealing the circular chamber where the 7 elders sat in eternal vigil. Their ancient forms, preserved by technology beyond most species' understanding, turned toward her with synchronized precision. Elder Yiramash, the eldest among them, spoke first. Ambassador Kethare, we have received disturbing reports from the Outer Rim. A new species has emerged from the 3rd spiral arm. They call themselves humans. Get Tabawet Zetpet Fun. Honored Elder, surely another primitive species poses no threat to our great civilization. We have protocols for integration. These are not like the others, Elder Zephon interjected, his voice carrying undertones of something Kethare had never heard before. Was it concern? Fear? They have achieved faster-than-light travel in less than a century after splitting the atom. Their progress is unprecedented. The holographic display in the center of the chamber flickered to life, showing a blue-green world orbiting a yellow star. Earth, as the humans called it, looked unremarkable. No massive ring structures, no Dyson spheres, no obvious signs of advanced technology that typically marked spacefaring civilizations. They launched their first satellite merely 70 of their years ago, Elder Miraketh continued. Yesterday, they destroyed an asteroid the size of a small moon that threatened their homeworld. Not with careful calculations and precise energy beams, but by strapping nuclear warheads to a spacecraft and ramming it into the target at impossible speeds. Kethare, try to process this information. Honored Elders, that sounds reckless. Reckless, yes, but effective. Elder Yiramash gestured, and the display changed to show grainy footage of a human spacecraft. It looked crude, assembled from metal plates welded together, with chemical rockets providing thrust. Their technology appears primitive, but they compensate with what they call ingenuity and something else we've never encountered before. What is that, Honored Elder? They call it spite. The chamber fell silent. In all their eons of existence, the elders had cataloged millions of species, documented countless behavioral patterns, but spite was not in their vast libraries of knowledge. Elder Sepon leaned forward. 3 days ago, our monitoring station in the Kepler sector intercepted a human transmission. They had discovered one of our automated survey probes. The display shifted again, showing the sleek, silvery form of a standard Zephyrian survey probe. These devices have been mapping the galaxy for millennia, cataloging resources and potential threats. They were invisible to most species' sensors, designed to observe without being detected. The humans not only detected it, Elder Miraketh said quietly, they captured it. Kethare's breathing apparatus fluttered in surprise. That's impossible. Our stealth technology was defeated by human radar arrays built from copper and silicon. Primitive by our standards, but apparently effective enough. Elder Yiramash's ancient fingers drummed against his chair. But that's not the most concerning part. Show her the transmission, Zephon. The air shimmered, and suddenly, the chamber was filled with the sound of human voices. They spoke in a harsh, guttural language that their translation systems struggled to process. But the emotion was unmistakable: excitement, determination, and something that made Kethare's skin crawl. Houston, we've got confirmation. This thing is definitely not ours. The materials alone, we've never seen anything like this. But we're taking it apart anyway. Sarah's already identified what looks like a power source. If we can reverse engineer this technology. The transmission cut off. The elders sat in contemplative silence before Elder Yiramash spoke again. They found our most advanced scout probe, a device that has observed civilizations for thousands of years undetected, and their first instinct was not to worship it, fear it, or even study it carefully. They decided to take it apart to see how it works. Surely they cannot comprehend our technology, Kethare protested. Perhaps not fully, but our long-range sensors indicate they've already begun incorporating elements of what they learned into their own designs. In 3 days, Ambassador. 3 days. Elder Miraketh stood, her robes flowing around her like liquid starlight. We have observed this species for only a short time, but their pattern is clear. They do not accept limitations. When they encounter something they cannot understand, they do not retreat or seek guidance from higher powers. They poke it, prod it, and break it apart until they figure out how it works. Then, they build something better, Elder Zephan added grimly. The implications began to settle in Kethare's mind like ice water through her veins. What are your orders, honored elders? We must make contact, Elder Yiramash declared. But not as we have with other species. We cannot position ourselves as gods to be worshipped or as benevolent guardians offering protection. These humans would see through such deceptions immediately. Then, how do we approach them? The eldest of the elders was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of experience. Carefully, Ambassador. Very carefully. And with the understanding that for the first time in our civilization's history, we may not be dealing with a species we can control. Kethare left the chamber with new orders and a growing sense of unease. As she prepared for humanity's first official contact with a galactic power, she couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to change in ways none of them could predict. The humans were coming, and they were bringing their spite with them. 3 weeks later, Kethare stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Eternal Harmony as it approached the Sol system. The ship was a masterpiece of Zephyrian technology, its bioorganic hull capable of reshaping itself for optimal efficiency. Weapons that could crack planets remained hidden within its seemingly peaceful exterior. Ambassador, we're receiving multiple targeting locks, reported Navigation Officer Telquin. At least 30 different sources. Their military appears to be active. Through the bridge's transparent walls, Kethare could see the human homeworld growing larger. But between them and Earth hung something that made her breath catch in her throat. Space around the planet was filled with structures, satellites, and spacecraft in numbers that defied belief. How many ships do they have in orbit? She asked quietly. Over 3,000 active vessels, ranging from single-person fighters to construction platforms the size of small cities. And Ambassador, they're still building. The communications array chimed with an incoming transmission. The voice that emerged was crisp, professional, and utterly without deference. Unknown vessel, this is Earth Defense Coordination. You are entering restricted space. State your intentions or prepare to be fired upon. No greeting. No expression of awe at their obviously superior technology. Just a flat statement of fact. Comply or face consequences. Kethare activated the translation protocols and responded. This is Ambassador Kethare of the Zephyrian Council. We come in peace, seeking dialogue with your species representatives. There was a pause. Then, stand by for escort assignment. Follow the designated flight path exactly. Any deviation will be interpreted as hostile action. Ambassador, Telquin whispered, they're not impressed by us at all. As their ship was guided through a maze of orbital platforms and defense stations, Kethare began to understand what the elders had tried to tell her. The humans weren't building their space infrastructure to impress anyone. They were building it to work. Every structure served a purpose. Communication arrays, manufacturing facilities, research stations, and, yes, weapons platforms that tracked their movement with mechanical precision. This wasn't the chaotic expansion of a young species stumbling into space. This was methodical, purposeful, and utterly pragmatic. The escort ships are interesting, Telquin observed. Their design philosophy is completely different from ours. Kethra looked at the human vessels flanking them. Where Zephyrian ships were elegant curves of living metal and energy, these were angular, functional, and covered in what appeared to be additional armor plating welded onto the hull. They've weaponized everything, she realized. Even their escort ships could probably take on a consortium cruiser. And their pilots, Telquin added with something approaching admiration, are flying formations that would kill most organic beings. The G-forces alone. As they descended toward Earth's surface, Kethra saw cities that sprawled across continents, connected by transportation networks that moved with clockwork precision. The planet's surface showed signs of massive engineering projects. Rivers redirected, mountains carved away, entire regions reshaped to serve human purposes. They're terraforming their own homeworld, she murmured. The landing pad where they set down was surrounded by human military personnel. But these weren't ceremonial guards in dress uniforms. They were combat troops in powered armor, carrying weapons that her ship's sensors identified as dangerously advanced for their supposed technology level. How did they develop plasma rifles without mastering fusion power? Telquin asked in confusion. I'm beginning to suspect, Kethra said slowly, that our intelligence about their capabilities may have been incomplete. The airlock opened, and, for the first time in her life, Ambassador Kethra stepped onto an alien world as the visitor, not the superior. The gravity was stronger than she was used to, the air thicker, and everything felt somehow more solid, more real than the carefully controlled environments of Zephyrian worlds. A human approached them, female, wearing a simple blue garment that somehow managed to convey authority without ornamentation. Her hair was gray, her face lined with age, but her eyes held an intelligence that immediately commanded respect. Ambassador Kethra, I'm Secretary General Chun Wei of the United Earth Government. Welcome to our world. The greeting was polite, but not subservient. This human looked at her not as a goddess descended from the heavens, but as an equal, perhaps even a potential threat. Secretary General Chun, I bring greetings from the Council of Zephyria and the species of the galactic community. We're aware of your council, Chun replied calmly. We've been monitoring your communications for some time. The words hit Kethra like a physical blow. You've been monitoring us? Of course. When we found your probe, we naturally traced its transmission origins. Your communication networks aren't as secure as you might believe. Chun gestured toward a building that rose into the sky like a crystalline spear. Shall we discuss this inside? I think you'll find we have quite a lot to talk about. As they walked toward the building, Kethra noticed something that chilled her to the bone. The human soldiers weren't watching the sky for threats. They were watching her, not with hostility, but with the careful attention of professionals assessing a potential enemy's capabilities. These humans weren't awed by first contact with an advanced alien civilization. They were preparing for war. Secretary General Chun led them through corridors lined with what appeared to be decorative panels. But Kethra's enhanced senses detected the subtle hum of energy flowing through them. The humans had turned their architecture into a weapon system. Your building is armed, she observed. Chun smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both welcoming and predatory. Everything on Earth is armed, Ambassador. We learned a long time ago that the universe doesn't care about our feelings. They entered a conference room where other humans waited. Each wore simple clothing, but Kethra's diplomatic training allowed her to read the subtle signs of power and authority. These were the leaders of humanity's military, scientific, and political institutions. Ambassador, Chun said, gesturing to the assembled humans, I'd like you to meet General Morrison, head of Earth Defense Command, Dr. Yamamoto, our chief xenobiologist, Professor Petrov, head of the Reverse Engineering Division, and Admiral Hassan, commander of the Solar Fleet. Each human nodded politely, but Kethra noticed their eyes never stopped moving, never stopped analyzing. They were studying her the way a predator studies prey. Reverse Engineering Division? She asked. Professor Petrov, a thin man with intense eyes, leaned forward. We've been quite busy with your probe, Ambassador. Fascinating technology. We've managed to decode about 60% of its systems so far. That's impossible. Our technology is thousands of years ahead of yours. Is it? Dr. Yamamoto interjected. Or do you simply approach problems differently? Your probe uses quantum crystalline matrices to store data. Very elegant, very efficient. But the underlying principles are actually quite simple once you understand the quantum mechanical interactions involved. Telquin, standing behind Kethare, made a small sound of distress. The humans were discussing advanced Zephyrian technology as if it were a children's toy. We've been able to replicate some of your power distribution systems, General Morrison added conversationally. Our engineers are excited about the applications for our defense grid. You've weaponized our technology, Kethare stated. We've improved it, Admiral Hassan corrected. Your power systems are beautifully designed for efficiency and longevity. But they're not built to handle the energy loads required for high-output weapon systems. We've had to make some modifications. Shun gestured to chairs around the conference table. Please sit. We have much to discuss. As they took their seats, Kethare noticed the chairs automatically adjusted to accommodate her different physiology. The humans had studied her species and prepared accordingly. Everything about this encounter was planned, controlled, and utterly professional. Ambassador, Chen began, we know about your council. We know about the galactic community. And we know you've been watching us for quite some time. How long have you known? About 6 months after we achieved faster-than-light communication. Your observation posts aren't as hidden as you think, especially once you know what to look for. Dr. Yamamoto activated a holographic display that showed the locations of a dozen Zephyrian monitoring stations throughout human space. We've been monitoring you monitoring us. It's been quite educational. Kethare felt the careful diplomatic framework she prepared crumbling around her. What do you want from us? Information, General Morrison replied bluntly. Your council has been cataloging species for thousands of years. We want access to that database. Why? Because we need to know what's out there, Admiral Hassan said. Earth has been attacked twice in the last 50 years by asteroids that showed signs of artificial redirection. We initially assumed they were natural events, but the mathematical probabilities don't support that conclusion. Telquin gasped behind her. You think someone has been trying to destroy your world? We don't think it, Professor Petrov said calmly. We know it. The trajectory modifications were too precise, too well-timed to be coincidental. Someone out there wants humanity extinct. Chun leaned forward. We've been preparing for a war we didn't understand against an enemy we couldn't identify. Your arrival suggests that war might be closer than we thought. The Council maintains peace throughout the galaxy, Kethare protested. We have no enemies. Then, explain the Devourers, Dr. Yamamoto said quietly. The conference room fell silent. Kethare felt her respiratory system seize as the forbidden name hung in the air. How do you know that word? We've been listening to your transmissions for months. Emergency protocols, evacuation procedures, contingency plans. All centered around something you call the Devourers. Something that terrifies your entire civilization. General Morrison's eyes were hard. Something you've been keeping secret from the species under your protection. The Devourers are a myth, Kethare said automatically, though her voice lacked conviction. Are they? Admiral Hassan activated another display. Because 3 weeks ago, we detected a massive energy signature moving through the Centaur sector. Our long-range sensors picked up gravitational anomalies consistent with a fleet of ships larger than anything in our databases. Ships that were heading directly toward Council space. Kethare's hands began to shake. That's classified information. Not anymore, Chen said gently. Ambassador, we're not your enemies. But we're also not going to sit quietly while threats gather in the darkness. If something is coming for the galaxy, Earth will be ready. You don't understand, Kethare whispered. The Devourers aren't just another hostile species. There's something else entirely. Something that consumes civilizations, technologies, entire star systems. They turn everything they touch into more of themselves. Sounds familiar, Professor Petrov observed. We have similar concepts in our own mythology, but myths often have roots in reality. Telquin stepped forward. Ambassador, perhaps we should know. Kethare straightened in her chair. They're right. If the Devourers have returned, then hiding the truth serves no purpose. She looked around the table at the assembled humans. Your species is less than a century old in space, and you're already talking about fighting a threat that drove my people to the edge of extinction 10,000 years ago. Tell us about them, Dr. Yamamoto requested. Kethare began to speak, her voice growing stronger as she shared secrets that had been buried for millennia. They appeared in the outer rim without warning. Ships that seemed to be made of living metal, technology that adapted faster than we could develop countermeasures. They didn't just conquer planets, they consumed them, broke them down at the molecular level, and rebuilt them into more ships, more weapons, more of themselves. A von Neumann swarm, Admiral Hassan said grimly. Self-replicating machines with military applications. You have a name for it. We have names for lots of things that could kill us, General Morrison replied. It's a hobby of ours. Continue. The war lasted 300 years. We tried everything, diplomacy, appeasement, superior firepower. Nothing worked. In the end, we only survived by convincing them we weren't worth the effort. We made ourselves small, hidden, carefully managed. The Council wasn't created to rule the galaxy. It was created to keep civilization quiet enough that the Devourers wouldn't notice. The humans exchanged glances around the table. Shin spoke first. And now they're coming back. If your sensors are correct, yes. But this time, they won't find a galaxy of hidden, frightened species. They'll find Earth. Good, General Morrison said simply. Kethare stared at him in shock. Good? You don't understand what you're saying. The Devourers destroyed civilizations with technology far more advanced than yours. Maybe, Admiral Hassan acknowledged. But those civilizations made the mistake of trying to hide from the problem. Humans don't hide from problems. We solve them. How can you possibly solve something that consumed half the galaxy? Dr. Yamamoto smiled, and there was something terrifying in the expression. Ambassador, in the last 6 months, we've reverse-engineered your probe, identified your monitoring stations, developed countermeasures for your stealth technology, and prepared defensive systems you can't even detect. And that was just from one piece of equipment. Professor Petrov leaned forward. Now we want you to give us everything you have on the Devourers. Every scrap of data, every failed strategy, every piece of wreckage you've collected over the centuries. We're going to figure out how they work. And then? Kethare asked. Then, we're going to break them, General Morrison said with absolute conviction. Chun stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Ambassador, we'd like you to return to your council with a message. Earth is willing to share our technology and tactical innovations with any species that will stand and fight. But we will not hide, we will not run, and we will not surrender our civilization to something that should have been destroyed 10,000 years ago. As they left the conference room, Telquin whispered urgently in Kethare's ear. Ambassador, we cannot possibly provide them with classified information about the Devourers. The Elders will never approve. The Elders, Kethare said quietly, may not have a choice. These humans aren't asking for permission, Telquin. They're offering alliance. And if we refuse... She looked back at the conference room, where humanity's leaders were already deep in planning discussions. I suspect they'll fight the Devourers with or without our help. And I'm beginning to think they might actually win. The return journey to Zephyria passed in contemplative silence. Kethare spent hours reviewing the recordings of her meetings with the human leadership, trying to understand what made them so different from every other species the Council had encountered. It wasn't their technology, though their rapid advancement was impressive. It wasn't their military capabilities, though their preparations for conflict were thorough. It was their attitude. Other species, when faced with existential threats, looked for protectors, sought ways to minimize risk, or simply accepted their fate. Humans looked at existential threats and got angry. As their ship entered Council space, Kethare prepared her report for the Elders. She would recommend full disclosure about the Devourers and immediate alliance with Earth. The humans were right about one thing. The galaxy was changing, and the old ways of managing that change were no longer sufficient. The Devourers were coming, but this time they would find something they had never encountered before. A species that viewed their approach not as a disaster to be avoided, but as a problem to be solved. And humans were very, very good at solving problems. The emergency session of the Council of Zephyria had been called within hours of Kethare's return. The circular chamber, usually serene and contemplative, buzzed with urgent conversations as representatives from across the galaxy arrived to hear her report. Elder Yiramash called for silence, his ancient voice carrying easily through the vast space. Ambassador Kethare will now present her findings regarding the human species. Kethare stood at the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes upon her. Around the curved walls, representatives from 43 different species waited to hear about humanity's first official contact with galactic civilization. Honored elders, esteemed colleagues, she began. I must report that our assumptions about the human species were fundamentally incorrect. They're not primitive, they're not awed by our technology, and they're not interested in joining our galactic community as junior members. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Representative Caltech of the Andromedan Commonwealth stood, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. Ambassador, surely you exaggerate. No species achieves spaceflight without recognizing the superiority of those who came before. The humans have been monitoring our communications for months, Kethare replied flatly. They detected and captured our survey probe, reverse-engineered our technology, and identified the locations of our monitoring stations throughout their space. They knew about the Council before I ever set foot on their world. The chamber erupted in shocked conversations. Elder Zephon raised his hand for silence. Continue, Ambassador. Furthermore, they have discovered information about the Devourers. The chamber fell deadly quiet. Even the atmosphere processors seemed to pause in their gentle humming. Representative Thexmai of the vegan territories half rose from her seat. That word is forbidden, Ambassador. The Council decreed. The humans don't recognize Council authority over information, Kethare interrupted. They intercepted our emergency transmissions and identified the threat patterns. They know something called the Devourers exists. They know we fear them, and they know we've been keeping this secret from the galaxy. Elder Miraketh leaned forward. What was their reaction to learning of this threat? They want to fight them. Another wave of shocked murmurs filled the chamber. Representative Zilkoth of the Centaurian Alliance stood, his tentacles writhing in agitation. Fight the Devourers? That's madness. The ancient records clearly show that military resistance only draws their attention. The humans believe our ancestors made tactical errors, Kethare continued. They want access to all our historical data, so they could develop new strategies. Absolutely not, declared Representative Ventar of the Inner Worlds. The information about the Devourers remains classified for excellent reasons. Release that data, and panic will spread throughout the galaxy. The humans suggested that hiding from the problem hasn't made it go away, Kethare observed. Our long-range sensors confirm massive gravitational anomalies in the outer rim. Something large is moving toward Council space. Elder Yiramash stood, his ancient form casting long shadows across the chamber floor. The wisdom of our ancestors saved civilization itself. When the Devourers last appeared, they consumed everything that drew their attention. Only by becoming small, quiet, and unnoticed did we survive. And now they're returning, Kethare said. What happens when they find a species that refuses to become small and quiet? Then, that species will be destroyed, and the galaxy will learn why our policies exist, Representative Caltech declared. These humans are clearly too young and aggressive to understand the nature of the threat they face. I watched their military leaders discuss fighting an enemy that terrifies our entire civilization, Kethare said. They weren't boasting or posturing. They were planning. These humans have spent their entire existence fighting wars against impossible odds. They don't know how to surrender. Elder Zephon gestured for attention. What specific proposals did they make? They offered to share their technological innovations with any species willing to fight alongside them. They want to create an alliance of worlds that will meet the Devourers with coordinated resistance rather than scattered attempts at hiding. The chamber erupted into arguments. Representative after representative stood to denounce the human proposals as dangerous, reckless, and contrary to 10,000 years of successful survival strategy. The humans don't understand, shouted Representative Thexmai. The Devourers don't just destroy civilizations, they absorb them. Every ship they consume makes them stronger. Every technology they encounter becomes part of their capabilities. Military resistance feeds their growth. Then, perhaps, Kethare said quietly, and her voice somehow carried through the chaos. It's time to try something different. The chamber fell silent. Elder Yiramash studied her with eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Explain. For 10,000 years, we've followed the same strategy. Hide, minimize our presence, avoid drawing attention. And for 10,000 years, the threat has remained. The Devourers haven't been destroyed or driven away. They've simply been elsewhere, consuming other galaxies, growing stronger. Representative Zilkatha's tentacles curled in agitation. Because direct confrontation failed. The ancient records show the failure of individual species fighting alone. Kethare interrupted. The humans propose something that has never been tried, a coordinated galaxy-wide defense, led by a species barely a century old in space. Representative Vintar laughed bitterly. What could they possibly know about threats that predate their civilization? They know about survival, Kethare replied. Their planet has been attacked twice by artificially redirected asteroids. Someone has been trying to eliminate humanity before they could become a threat. The humans survived because they noticed the pattern and prepared accordingly. Elder Miraketh leaned forward with interest. You're suggesting the Devourers have already identified Earth as a threat? I'm suggesting the humans may be right about confronting problems rather than hiding from them. They've survived assassination attempts, developed advanced technology in impossibly short time frames, and they're preparing for a war most species would flee from. The debate continued for hours. Representative after representative stood to argue for maintaining the traditional policies of caution and concealment. The humans were too young, too aggressive, too naive to understand the true nature of cosmic threats. Finally, Elder Yiramash called for order. The council will vote. All in favor of sharing classified information about the Devourers and forming a military alliance with the human species. Kethare watched as voting indicators appeared around the chamber. Green for approval, red for rejection. As the votes registered, her heart sank. 41 red indicators. 2 green. Her own vote, and, surprisingly, Representative Mokhtar of the Silicon Worlds. The motion fails, Elder Yiramash declared. The Council's position remains unchanged. Information about the Devourers stays classified, and we will not form military alliances with aggressive species. Kethare remained standing as the other representatives began to file out of the chamber. Elder Zephon approached her, his expression troubled. Ambassador, I understand your concerns, but the wisdom of ages may no longer be sufficient, Kethare finished. Elder, what if we're wrong? What if hiding has only delayed the inevitable? Then we will face that possibility when it arrives. But we will not risk the safety of the galaxy on the aggressive impulses of an untested species. As the chamber emptied, Kethare found herself alone with her doubts. The humans had impressed her with their competence, their determination, and their refusal to accept defeat as inevitable. But the Council, in its ancient wisdom, had chosen the path of traditional caution. She activated her personal communicator and sent a brief message to Earth. Council vote negative. Traditional policies maintained. Suggest you proceed with independent preparations. The response came within hours, transmitted on frequencies the humans had somehow made undetectable to Council monitoring systems. Understood. Alliance offer remains open to individual species. Human preparations continuing. We'll inform you when devourers arrive. Not if. When. Kethra spent the following weeks watching intelligence reports from the Outer Rim. The gravitational anomalies were growing stronger, more numerous. Whatever was approaching the galaxy was massive beyond calculation. Then, the first refugee ships began arriving. The initial reports were dismissed as navigation errors or sensor malfunctions. Ships appearing at Council border stations with tales of entire star systems going dark, of planets stripped down to their metallic cores, of fleets that seemed to repair and grow stronger with every engagement. Representative Caltech's homeworld went silent first. The Andromedan Commonwealth's crystal cities, which had stood for 5,000 years, simply stopped transmitting. Long-range scans showed the planet's surface had been completely reconstructed into geometric patterns that hurt to look at. Within days, 3 more systems reported similar losses. The pattern was unmistakable, undeniable, and terrifyingly familiar. The Devourers had returned. Emergency sessions were called daily as the Council struggled to maintain order among increasingly panicked member species. The traditional response protocols were activated. Minimize transmissions, reduce industrial activity, prepare for extended hiding periods. But something had changed in the galaxy's response. Instead of the coordinated surrender to inevitability that had characterized previous encounters with existential threats, reports began arriving of species that were choosing to fight. The Silicon worlds had apparently been in secret communication with Earth. Their crystalline warships, enhanced with human technology, were engaging Devourer scouts in the Outer Rim. Early reports suggested they were achieving something unprecedented. They were winning individual battles. Representative Ventar stood before the emergency assembly, his face pale with shock. The humans have transmitted weapon specifications to 17 different species. They're coordinating resistance efforts across 3 sectors. This is exactly what we warned against, drawing attention through aggressive action. And yet, Elder Miraketh observed quietly, the Silicon worlds report successful defensive actions. Perhaps aggression, properly applied, has merits we failed to consider. Elder Yiramash called for order as arguments erupted throughout the chamber. The Council's position remains unchanged. We will not risk galactic civilization on untested strategies. But even as he spoke, more reports arrived. The vegan territories had requested human technical advisors. The Centaurian Alliance was retrofitting their fleets with Earth-designed weapon systems. Species that had hidden from conflict for millennia were suddenly preparing for war. Kethra stood to address the assembly. Honored elders, the galaxy is changing whether we approve or not. The question is no longer whether to fight the Devourers. It's whether we fight alongside our neighbors or watch them face annihilation alone. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than before, but still negative. And in the Outer Rim, the first coordinated fleet action between human and alien forces achieved something that 10,000 years of Council wisdom said was impossible. They stopped a Devourer advance. The galaxy was learning that sometimes the youngest voice in the room might have the best ideas. Admiral Hassan stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history assembled around Earth. What had begun as a desperate human preparation for inevitable conflict had evolved into something unprecedented, a voluntary alliance of species united not by Council mandate, but by shared determination to survive. Final count is in, reported Commander Singh from the tactical station. 2,437 ships from 28 different species. Everything from Centaurian dreadnoughts to Silicon World crystal ships to our own Earth-built carriers. Through the bridge's armored viewports, Hassan could see the massive fleet spreading across space in formations that would have been impossible just months ago. Human tactical doctrine, refined through centuries of warfare, had been adapted and adopted by alien species with radically different approaches to conflict. The result was a defensive strategy unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Status report from the outer perimeter? Hassan requested. The vegan territories report successful evacuation of the Kepler colonies. The Andromedan refugees are being processed on Luna base. And sir, Singh paused, checking his displays again. The Zephyrian Council has finally agreed to meet with you. Hassan nodded grimly. The Council's change of heart had come too late to matter strategically, but the symbolic value was significant. When the most conservative government in galactic history finally admitted that traditional policies were insufficient, it sent a clear message to any remaining fence-sitters. How long until the Devourers reach the inner systems? 43 hours, sir. Our deep space monitors show the main force moving through the Sagittarius sector at 0.8 light speed. Estimated strength. Singh hesitated. Sir, they've consumed 6 star systems since entering our galaxy. Our projections suggest their fleet has grown to over 50,000 units. 50,000 ships, each one built from the raw materials of destroyed civilizations. The mathematics of the situation should have been hopeless. By all traditional military doctrine, the Allied fleet should have been retreating to the deepest, most defensible positions available. Instead, they were advancing to meet the threat head-on. Signal from the flagship, Communications Officer Torres announced. Ambassador Kethare is ready for the final briefing. Hassan activated the holographic display that linked the command ships of the Allied fleet. Around the circular projection, the faces of military leaders from dozens of species appeared. At the center stood Ambassador Kethare, now wearing the insignia of a tactical coordinator rather than diplomatic robes. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished colleagues, Hassan began, our scouts confirm that our main force will enter the Sol system within 2 days. This is our last opportunity to review the battle plan. The display shifted to show a 3-dimensional map of the solar system. Red indicators marked the projected approach routes of the enemy fleet, while blue symbols showed the positions of Allied forces. Phase 1 involves the outer perimeter defense, continued Commander Yethrak of the Silicon Worlds, her crystalline form refracting the hologram's light. Our modified ships will engage the Devourer scouts using human-designed quantum torpedoes. Preliminary tests suggest these weapons can disrupt their adaptive capabilities. Phase 2, added General Vexthal of the Centaurian Alliance, focuses on the asteroid belt fortifications. Human engineers have converted 17 asteroids into weapons platforms. The Devourers have never encountered kinetic bombardment on this scale. Hassan watched the alien faces around the display. 6 months ago, most of these beings had never heard of humanity. Now, they were trusting human military doctrine with their species' survival. The responsibility was overwhelming. Phase 3 brings the main engagement around Earth orbit, Hassan resumed. Our capital ships will form a defensive sphere while fighter squadrons execute the disruption protocols. The key to success remains the same as it's been since this alliance formed: adaptability. Ambassador Kethare leaned forward. Admiral, our intelligence on Devourer tactics remains limited. What if they've evolved beyond our projections? Then we adapt faster than they do, Hassan replied simply. That's what humans are good at. And we've taught that philosophy to everyone who was willing to learn. The briefing continued for another hour, covering contingency plans, fallback positions, and emergency protocols. But Hassan knew that once the fighting began, most of those plans would become irrelevant. Battles were won by the decisions made in moments of crisis, not by preparations made in comfortable conference rooms. As the holographic conference ended, Hassan remained on the bridge, staring out at the fleet that represented the galaxy's last hope. Kethare's image lingered on the display. Admiral, she said quietly, I must ask you something that's been troubling me. Why are you doing this? Earth could have hidden like the rest of us. Your world is small, distant from the main shipping routes. The Devourers might have overlooked you entirely. Hassan was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Ambassador, there's something about humanity that I don't think other species understand. We've never been the strongest, fastest, or smartest species on our own planet. What we've always been is stubborn. Stubborn. We don't accept that problems can't be solved. We don't accept that threats can't be faced. And we really don't accept the idea that evil should be allowed to win because fighting it is difficult. Hassan looked directly at her image. The Devourers aren't a natural disaster we have to endure. They're a problem that can be solved. And humans are very good at solving problems. 22 hours later, the first Devourer scouts entered the outer solar system. The battle began exactly as planned. Silicon World crystal ships, their hulls reinforced with human-designed armor plating, engaged the enemy scouts at maximum range. Quantum torpedoes, based on principles reverse-engineered from Zephyrian technology but weaponized through human innovation, struck their targets with devastating effectiveness. For the first time in galactic history, Devourer ships were being destroyed faster than they could adapt to the weapons being used against them. Outer Perimeter reports successful engagement. Commander Singh announced, his voice tight with excitement. 37 enemy scouts destroyed, 0 allied losses. Don't celebrate yet, Hassan warned. Those were just the advance units. The real test comes when their main force arrives. As if summoned by his words, the long-range sensors erupted with contact alerts. The Devourer main fleet was dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Thousands of ships, each one a fusion of organic and mechanical technology that defied traditional engineering principles. "My God," whispered Commander Singh. "Sir, they're not just ships. They're cities. Some of those things are the size of moons." Hassan activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Hassan. Execute Phase 2. All units to battle stations." The asteroid belt had been transformed over the previous months into the most heavily fortified region of space in galactic history. 17 asteroids had been hollowed out and converted into weapons platforms, each one capable of accelerating multi-ton projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. The Devourers had never encountered kinetic bombardment on this scale, because no previous civilization had been reckless enough to attempt it. The energy requirements were enormous, the targeting calculations impossibly complex, and the risk of collateral damage extreme. Humans had never let impossibility stop them from trying interesting ideas. The first kinetic salvo struck the Devourer fleet with the force of directed stellar explosions. Ships that had survived 10,000 years of conquest simply ceased to exist, converted to rapidly expanding clouds of superheated plasma. But the Devourers adapted quickly. Their remaining ships began evasive maneuvers while launching countermeasures that Hassan's tactical computers couldn't identify. "They're learning our attack patterns," reported Commander Singh. "Effectiveness of the kinetic bombardment is dropping rapidly." "Signal Phase 3, Hassan ordered. All ships advance to engagement range." What followed was unlike any battle in recorded galactic history. Human carriers launched fighter squadrons that had been trained in tactics borrowed from 40 different species. Centaurian dreadnoughts provided heavy fire support, while Silicon World crystal ships used their unique properties to disrupt Devourer communication networks. And at the center of the formation, Earth's own fleet demonstrated the culmination of centuries of human military innovation. Ships that looked like crude metal assemblies compared to the elegant designs of older civilizations, but which carried weapon systems that had never been seen before. "Sir," Torres called from the communication station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Devourer fleet." "Put it through." The voice that emerged from the speakers was unlike anything Hassan had ever heard. It seemed to come from multiple sources simultaneously, creating harmonics that suggested vast collective intelligence. "Young species, you resist consumption. This is unprecedented. Your technological progress exceeds projection parameters. Adaptation protocols are insufficient." "Good," Hassan replied to the transmission. "We're just getting started." The battle raged for 18 hours. Ships on both sides were destroyed, repaired, and destroyed again. The Devourer's adaptive capabilities were impressive, but they had never faced an enemy that adapted faster than they did. Human engineering teams, working alongside alien specialists, modified weapon systems in real time to counter enemy adaptations. Pilots developed new tactics on the fly to exploit weaknesses that appeared and disappeared within minutes. And gradually and possibly the tide of battle turned. "Sir," Singh announced, his voice filled with awe, "the enemy fleet is withdrawing." Hassan stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The Devourer fleet, reduced to less than half its original strength, was indeed pulling back from the engagement zone. Another transmission arrived from the enemy fleet. Analysis complete. This species represents unprecedented threat to consumption protocols. Alternative galaxies selected for harvest. This sector will be avoided. As the Devourer fleet disappeared into faster-than-light travel, heading back toward intergalactic space, Admiral Hassan found himself surrounded by cheering bridge crew. Throughout the solar system, ships from dozens of species celebrated the first victory against an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. Ambassador Kethare's image appeared on the holographic display, tears streaming down her face. "Admiral, I don't understand. How did you know this would work?" Hassan smiled tiredly. "We didn't know, Ambassador. But humans don't let uncertainty stop us from doing what needs to be done." In the weeks that followed, as the galaxy slowly recovered from its first glimpse of hope in 10,000 years, Hassan received countless requests for interviews, tactical analyses, and technology transfers. Every species wanted to understand how humanity had achieved the impossible. The answer was simpler than most expected. Humans had looked at an insurmountable problem and gotten angry about it. Then they had done what humans always did with problems that made them angry. They had fixed it. The Elders had warned the galaxy that humans were unstoppable. For once, the Elders had been absolutely right.